The night after my father's funeral, I slept in my car, parked right outside the house I grew up in. The engine was off, but I could still smell the faint trace of gasoline on my hands from filling up earlier that day. My body trembled partly from the late October chill, partly from the way everything in my life had shifted in less than 48 hours. That house, my father's house, stood under the streetlight, like a stranger. The curtains were drawn, the windows dark. It was the first time in my life I looked at that porch and didn't feel welcome. I watched the front door, half hoping it might open, half dreading that it would. My stepsister, Leah, was inside her kids, her husband, their laughter muffled through walls that once echoed only my father's voice. I thought back to that morning, the way she'd turned to me with a casual shrug and said, "We'll have to move things around now that there's more of us here." Her tone was light, but her eyes had already made a claim. I didn't understand then what she meant by move things around. But by evening, when I returned from the cemetery and found my bedroom door locked, I understood perfectly. She had moved in and I had been moved out. Before I tell you what happened next, I need you to understand something about my father. He wasn't perfect, but he was proud of his home, proud of the daughter he raised. He used to say, "This house will always be your safe place, Nora. No matter what happens, you'll have a roof here." That house was a modest 2-story place on Maplewood Lane. Nothing fancy, but full of warmth. The smell of coffee always lingered in the mornings. And in winter, Dad would burn cedarwood in the fireplace until the whole place smelled like comfort itself. After Mom passed when I was 14, it was just him and me. We didn't have much, but we had each other. Then, when I turned 25, he remarried. Her name was Elaine, and with her came a teenage daughter, Leah. At first, I tried. I really did. I remember baking lemon squares the day they moved in. The way Dad smiled proudly at me, as if to say, "See, we're going to be a family again." But Leah, she never looked at me the way a sister should. She was polite, but distant, like someone waiting for an elevator that never arrived. We barely shared a sentence unless it was through our parents. And when Dad passed suddenly a heart attack in his sleep just 3 months ago, I realized I knew almost nothing about the woman who'd now become my co-heir. The morning after the funeral, I woke up in my old bed. My room still smelled faintly like lavender and laundry powder, the scent of stability, the illusion of home. Downstairs, Leah was already unpacking boxes. Her husband, Rick, a tall man with an accountant's stiffness, was barking orders at the movers. Hélène sat at the kitchen table, staring into a mug she wasn't drinking from. I tried to smile, to keep things civil. "Morning," I said softly. Leah looked up. "Morning. We're just getting settled. You know how it is." I nodded, though I didn't. "Settled?" I asked. She gave me a small, clipped laugh. "Yeah. Rick and I figured we'd stay here for a while. The kids need stability. It's what Dad would have wanted." Dad. That word hit me like a slap. I didn't say it out loud, but inside I screamed, "He was my dad, Leah, not yours." Instead, I just said, "Of course." For a while, she smiled a smile that didn't reach her eyes and turned back to her boxes. Later that afternoon, I sat with Elaine on the porch. She looked smaller somehow, wrapped in Dad's old cardigan, her hair pinned loosely. "I didn't know they were moving in," I said quietly. She sighed, eyes still fixed on the yard. "They don't have anywhere else to go, Nora. Rick lost his job, and their lease was up. It's temporary." Temporary. I wanted to believe her, but something in my gut said otherwise. "You'll always have your place here," she added quickly. "This is still your home." But when Leah's kids came running out, shouting, laughing, dragging toys across the lawn, I noticed the way Elaine's voice softened toward them, the way her body leaned slightly away from me. That night, I went to my room, closed the door, and tried to hold on to my father's voice in my memory. "Nora, you're my heart. This house will always be yours." But I didn't know then that promises, once spoken, could be rewritten by the living. The next day, I came home from running errands to find Leah's husband in the hallway. He was holding a roll of painter's tape and a screwdriver. "Hey, Nora," he said. "Leah mentioned you might move your stuff to the guest room?" He blinked. "Excuse me?" "The one near the garage," he said, as if that made sense. "We're setting up the main bedrooms for the kids." I laughed not because it was funny, but because my brain couldn't process the absurdity. "That's my room," I said. He shrugged. "Leah said you'd understand." I stood there, frozen. The hall smelled like fresh paint, like they'd already started claiming it, erasing me one brushstroke at a time. When I opened the door to my room, I found half my things stacked neatly in boxes. My dresser was gone. My bed had been replaced with a bunk bed, and taped to one of the boxes was a yellow sticky note in Leah's handwriting. Hope you don't mind the kids needed space. You can use the guest room until we figure things out. I stared at that heart symbol until my vision blurred. That night, I didn't move my things. I didn't sleep in the guest room. I sat on the porch swing with Dad's cardigan draped over my shoulders and realized something I hadn't wanted to face. Leah wasn't moving in, she was moving me out. And no one, not even Elaine, was stopping her. It's strange how silence can change its meaning. Before Dad died, the house was full of quiet comfort. The kind that came with knowing someone was nearby, even if no one was speaking. After he was gone, that same quiet felt sharp, like walking barefoot over broken glass. The first few days after Leah's family moved in, I tried to stay out of the way. I told myself it was temporary. Just like Elaine said, I spent most of my time at the library, updating my resume, or at the diner downtown, where Dad used to take me for pancakes every Sunday. But every time I came home, something else had changed. First, my photo albums disappeared from the living room shelves. Then the framed picture of Dad and me fishing at Lake Ridge vanished from the mantel. When I asked Leah about it, she smiled sweetly and said, "Oh, I think Mom packed some things away to protect them. You know, until we reorganize." But the way her eyes darted away when she said it told me otherwise. One afternoon, I came home to find Elaine standing in the kitchen, looking frail, smaller than I remembered. "Elaine," I started setting down my grocery bag. "Have you seen the photo albums? The ones from when Dad..." Before I could finish, Leah's voice cut in from behind. "They're in storage," she said. "We don't need to clutter the place with old stuff right now." I turned to face her. She was wearing one of Dad's old flannel shirts, sleeves rolled up, like it was hers to own. "Old stuff?" I repeated quietly. She shrugged. "Well, it's not like we're running a museum, Nora. It's time to move forward. Dad's gone. The house needs fresh energy." Elaine opened her mouth to say something, but then closed it. Her hands trembled slightly around her coffee mug. I looked between them, the woman who had married my father and the woman who was trying to erase him, and I felt something tighten inside me. That was the first time I realized I might actually have to fight for what was mine. That night, I went to the guest room, the one they'd given me, and tried to rest. But the walls felt cold and unfamiliar. The room smelled faintly of paint thinner and damp carpet. I could hear Leah and Rick laughing downstairs, the sound of dishes clinking, a low hum of a television I used to fall asleep to. Around midnight, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Light ones, careful ones. The door creaked open slightly, and through the crack, I saw Leah's silhouette. She stood there for a moment, watching. I didn't move. I kept my breathing steady, pretending to sleep. After a few seconds, she closed the door quietly and walked away. I sat up, heart pounding. There was no reason for her to be there, not unless she was checking to see if I'd left. The next morning, I found my father's watch missing. It wasn't just any watch, it was his Navy-issued one from his early days. The one he wore every single day of my childhood. I had kept it on my nightstand since the day he passed. I tore through my boxes, through the drawers. Nothing. When I confronted Leah, she looked genuinely offended. "Why would I take it?" she asked. "Maybe you misplaced it when you moved your stuff out." "I didn't move my stuff out," I said, voice low but steady. "Well," she said, smiling that cold little smile again. "Then maybe someone else did." It was such an odd response, too calm, too practiced, that for the first time, I felt true suspicion bloom. Later that day, Elaine called me into the kitchen. "Leah mentioned you've been uncomfortable," she said softly. "Uncomfortable?" I laughed under my breath. "She kicked me out of my room, boxed up Dad's things, and I can't even find his watch." Elaine sighed, rubbing her temples. "Nora, please. The last thing I want is tension in this house. Leah and her family are going through a lot too." "Elaine," I said quietly, "this isn't about tension. It's about respect. Dad left this house to us, both of us. But right now, it feels like only one person is being treated like it's home." Her lips trembled. "You don't understand everything, Nora." "What don't I understand?" She looked away, eyes glistening. "Your father, he made some changes to his will before he passed. I didn't want to bring it up until things settled." For a moment, everything around me went still. The ticking of the kitchen clock grew louder, sharper. "What kind of changes?" I asked. Elaine didn't answer right away. She just whispered, "It's complicated." Then she left the room. That night, I sat alone on the porch again, clutching Dad's cardigan, staring out into the dark. The wind carried the faint scent of pine and autumn leaves. A part of me wanted to believe Elaine was protecting me, that she was just waiting for the right time to explain. But another part of me, the part that remembered Leah's smirk when she mentioned fresh energy, knew better. I opened my phone, scrolled through old messages from Dad. His last text to me read, "Don't worry, kiddo. I made sure you'll be okay, no matter what happens." I stared at those words for a long time. If he had made sure of that, then what did Elaine mean about changes? And why was Leah acting like she already owned everything? Something wasn't adding up. The next morning, I decided to find out for myself. I drove to the attorney's office that had handled Dad's paperwork, the same one whose name was printed on the envelope labeled Estate Matters that Elaine kept on her desk. The receptionist looked up as I entered. "Hi," I said softly. "My name's Nora Hall. My father, Richard Hall, passed recently. I just wanted to understand a few things about his will." She nodded, typing something into her computer. Then she frowned slightly. "Actually," she said, "the file's been marked confidential. Only the executor can access it." "Executor?" I asked. "Who's listed?" She checked again, then looked up at me. "Elaine Hall," she said. "Your stepmother." He swallowed hard. "Is there anything else you can tell me?" I asked. The receptionist hesitated, then leaned in slightly and whispered, "Just that there was an amendment a few weeks before he passed. But I can't tell you what it said." I thanked her and left my hands shaking. When I stepped back outside, the cold air hit my face like a slap. Dad had changed his will. Elaine was the executor, and Leah was acting like she already knew what it said. Something told me that the inheritance I thought was mine, the home that was supposed to be my safe place, might already be slipping away, and I wasn't about to let that happen without a fight. When I drove home that day, the world outside felt too bright, too still, the kind of calm that hides a storm underneath. Leah's car was in the driveway. The blinds were half drawn, and I could hear the faint thump of music from inside. Normally, that sound would have made me angry, but now, it just made me feel unwelcome. I stood at the door for a moment before going in. My hand hovered over the doorknob, my father's doorknob, and I thought about how, just a month ago, I'd come home to his voice calling from the kitchen. "Hey, kiddo, thought I heard your car." Now, all I heard was laughter. Leah's laughter, and a voice that wasn't supposed to belong here. "Rick." When I stepped inside, Leah was standing by the dining table, waving a pen in the air, and Rick was holding a thick envelope. They stopped talking the moment they saw me. "Oh, Nora," Leah said, that familiar fake warmth coating her voice. "We were just going through some paperwork Mom asked me to help with." "Paperwork?" I repeated, eyes on the envelope. She smiled, folding it in half. "Yeah, just bills and old insurance stuff. You wouldn't be interested." But I was interested more than she realized. That envelope looked exactly like the one on Elaine's desk. Cream-colored, legal-sized. And I knew from my trip to the attorney's office that there was only one envelope that mattered: the estate file. Later that evening, I waited until the house grew quiet. The kids were asleep. Rick was in the living room watching a game, and Leah was in the shower. Elaine had gone to bed early, leaving the office door slightly ajar. I hesitated at first, standing in the hallway, hearing the ticking clock echo through the house, but something inside me snapped. I needed the truth. I stepped in quietly. The air smelled faintly like lavender, Elaine's perfume. Her desk was neat, as always, except for a few scattered envelopes and a small wooden box with Dad's initials carved into it. My hands trembled as I lifted the file labeled Estate of Richard Hall. Inside, there were 3 documents: the original will, the amendment, and a handwritten note in Dad's voice that made my throat tighten. "To Elaine, please make sure both the girls are treated fairly. The house should always belong to family." But then, my eyes landed on the amendment, dated just 3 weeks before he died. It read, "In the event of my passing, I appoint Elaine Hall as executor. The house and all assets are to be held jointly between Elaine Hall and Leah Carter to ensure financial stability for the family. Nora Hall is entitled to a monetary share equal to 20% of the estate value." 20%, not half. Not even close. My knees went weak. I sat down hard in the chair, the words blurring together as if refusing to make sense. Dad had changed everything. The house, my home, wasn't mine anymore. I don't know how long I sat there before I heard footsteps behind me. "Nora." Leah's voice sliced through the air. I turned slowly. She stood in the doorway, towel around her hair, eyes sharp. "What are you doing?" she asked. I swallowed hard, looking for the truth. She smiled, not kindly, And did you find it? I found enough, I said, rising from the chair. You knew. That's why you moved in so fast, isn't it? You knew Dad changed the will. Her lips twitched. It wasn't exactly a secret. Mom told me after the funeral. So you just decided to take over? Kick me out of my own room? Leah crossed her arms. It's not your room anymore, Nora. It's the kids. This is a family home. We're building a life here. And where does that leave me? She tilted her head slightly. You'll figure something out. You're smart. You always had your independence. Maybe it's time to use it. There it was, that calm cruelty that only Leah could deliver. I clenched my fists. Dad never would have wanted this. Dad's not here, she said flatly. The words hit like ice water. Something inside me cracked, not loud, but deep. I brushed past her, leaving the office behind. My father's words, "You'll always have a roof here," echoed in my mind, hollow now, like a promise lost in the wind. The next morning, Elaine knocked softly on my door. I need to talk to you, she said, voice trembling. I sat up, exhausted. About what? She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. I know you saw the amendment. So it's true, I whispered, her eyes filled with tears. Your father thought he was doing the right thing, Nora. Leah was struggling. Rick had just lost his job, and their rent was overdue. He wanted to make sure everyone would be taken care of. At my expense? Elaine shook her head. He didn't mean it that way. He loved you. He just worried you'd be okay on your own. I stared at her. So you knew he changed it? And you didn't tell me? I wanted to. But after he passed, Leah insisted we keep things calm. I didn't want to fight right after the funeral. I laughed bitterly. Leah didn't want to fight because she already won. Elaine flinched. Please don't see it that way. How else am I supposed to see it, Elaine? I asked quietly. I lost my father, and then I lost my home. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then, in a whisper barely audible, she said, "There's more to it than you think." What does that mean? But she didn't answer. She just left, closing the door softly behind her. That night, as I lay in the cold guest room, the shadows on the ceiling looked like cracks spreading through my life, slow, inevitable. I thought about leaving, about taking my 20% and starting over somewhere else. But every time I pictured walking away, I saw Dad standing by the porch, smiling, saying, "This house will always be yours." I couldn't let Leah erase that. I couldn't let his promise die just because a few words on paper said otherwise. Something wasn't right. Elaine's cryptic words, the timing of the amendment, the way Leah seemed to know everything before anyone else, it all felt too convenient. So I made a decision that night. If the truth was buried somewhere in that house, I was going to dig it up no matter what it cost me.
When you reach the point where you have nothing left to lose, something inside you shifts. Fear turns into focus. Grief turns into fuel.
That's what happened to me after that night. I woke up the next morning with a strange calm. Not the kind that comes from peace, but from purpose. For weeks, I'd let Leah control the story. She'd painted herself as the grieving daughter, the caretaker, the one keeping Dad's legacy alive. Meanwhile, I was just the extra, the stepdaughter who didn't fit in the new picture. But if there's one thing my father taught me, it's this. When people try to take what's yours, don't fight them with anger. Fight them with truth. So that's what I decided to do. I started by visiting Dad's old friend, Mr. Collins, who lived 2 streets over. He was a retired accountant, the same man who helped Dad manage his finances for years. When I showed up at his porch, he looked surprised but warm. As always. "Nora?" he said, adjusting his glasses. "Haven't seen you since the funeral. How are you holding up, kiddo?" I tried to smile. Doing my best. "I actually came to ask you something about Dad." "Sure," he said, inviting me in. The house smelled like tobacco and peppermint tea. I sat across from him, hands folded. "Did you know about any changes Dad made to his will?" His brows furrowed. "No. Last I helped him with paperwork, he told me the house was split between you and Elaine. 50-50. My heart skipped. That's what I thought, too. He leaned back, eyes narrowing slightly. "When did he make the change?" 3 weeks before he died. Mr. Collins frowned deeper. "That's odd. He wasn't in good health then. He told me he was going in for some tests. Said he wanted to wait until he felt clear-headed before making any financial decisions." "Wait," I said slowly. "You're saying he didn't plan to make changes yet?" He shook his head. "Not from what he told me." A heavy silence filled the room. Then he said quietly, "Nora, I don't like implying things, but Your dad was careful with money. He wouldn't have changed his will without consulting me, unless someone convinced him to. Someone. The word hit me like a stone. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about Elaine's strange words. There's more to it than you think. More how? I needed proof, something that could show whether Dad had really signed that amendment willingly. So I went digging. After everyone went to bed, I slipped back into the office. My pulse was racing, but I moved carefully. Every creak of the floorboard felt like thunder. I found the file again, this time under a stack of property tax forms. I spread everything out on the desk: the original will, the amendment, the handwritten note, and that's when I noticed it. The signature. I'd seen Dad's handwriting my whole life, in birthday cards, on post-it notes, even on old grocery lists he'd leave on the fridge. His signature always had a little tilt, a loop on the R. But on this document, the loop was missing. The R was sharp, almost printed. My stomach dropped. Someone had forged it. I took photos of everything with my phone, every page, every date, every signature. And when I put the papers back exactly as I'd found them, I realized something even stranger. The ink on the amendment looked newer than the others, almost too new. The next day, I confronted Elaine. She was in the kitchen, stirring sugar into her coffee. Her hands shook when she saw me. Elaine, I need you to tell me the truth, I said quietly. She looked up, startled. What do you mean? The will. Did Dad really sign that amendment himself? Her spoon froze mid-stir. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she whispered, Nora, please don't do this. I have to, I said. Because if he didn't, then Leah's living here on a lie. Elaine's eyes filled with tears. You don't understand what you're asking me. I do, I said softly. I'm asking for honesty. She set the cup down, her shoulders trembling. Your father was sick, she finally said. He was confused toward the end. Leah was helping him with his paperwork, and she said he wanted to make sure everyone would be cared for. I didn't think. My chest tightened. So Leah handled the amendment? Elaine nodded weakly. She said he told her what to write. But did you see him sign it? Elaine's silence said everything. She looked down, tears slipping down her cheeks. No, she brought it to me after. She said he'd already signed it before I got home from the pharmacy. The room spun. Leah had written it. Leah had presented it. Leah had claimed he signed it. And Elaine, too broken, too trusting, had gone along. I didn't confront Leah right away. I needed proof, legal proof, before I accused her of forgery. So I called a lawyer. Her name was Mara Jennings, a small-town attorney with a calm voice and sharp instincts. When I explained everything, the sudden amendment, the inconsistent signature, Elaine's statement, she listened without interrupting. Then she said, if your father didn't personally sign that document in front of witnesses, we can challenge it. But I'll need to verify the handwriting and the notary record. Can you do that? I asked. Yes, she said. And if Leah forged it, she'll face serious consequences. Hearing those words gave me a strange sense of relief, like I could breathe again for the first time in weeks. The next few days were tense. I acted normal, keeping my voice even, my smile polite. Leah went about redecorating her home, painting walls, rearranging furniture, planning a birthday party for her son. But beneath that normalcy, I was gathering evidence, building my case piece by piece. Mara contacted the attorney's office who had notarized the amendment. Turns out, the notary who signed it had been retired for almost a year before the document's date. That was all the confirmation we needed. Leah hadn't just manipulated the situation, she had fabricated it. The night before I told them, I stood outside in the yard, looking up at my father's window, the one that used to glow soft with his bedside lamp. I whispered into the quiet, I'll make it right, Dad. I promise, because now, it wasn't just about property or money. It was about restoring his name and reclaiming the peace that woman tried to steal from both of us. Some truths don't explode, they unravel. Slowly, quietly, like a thread you tug at until the whole sweater comes apart. That's how it happened with Leah. I didn't plan a confrontation. I planned a revelation. Mara, my lawyer, suggested something subtle yet effective. Invite everyone involved to a meeting at the local attorney's office to review the estate paperwork together for closure. So that's what I did. Leah thought it was a formality. She showed up in a crisp white blouse, pearls around her neck, carrying her usual smugness like perfume. Elaine came too, pale and trembling, unable to meet my eyes. We sat across from each other at the polished oak table, the smell of coffee and ink filling the room. Mara began gently. Thank you for coming. We just want to go over the estate documents to make sure everything is clear and finalized. Leah nodded confidently. Of course. I've already read through everything. My father's wishes are very clear. Mara smiled politely. Yes, about that. We noticed something concerning in the recent amendment. Leah blinked. Concerning? What do you mean? Mara slid a folder across the table. We verified the notary signature on your father's will amendment, the one dated 3 weeks before his passing. The notary listed on that document had already retired nearly a year earlier. Leah's face went pale. Mara continued, calm and precise. Additionally, we had the signature, analyzed by a handwriting expert. The conclusion was unanimous. It was not written by Mr. Caldwell. You could have heard a pin drop. Elaine gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth. I just sat there, heart pounding, watching Leah's composure crack the way a porcelain mask fractures from one small hit. That's ridiculous, Leah stammered. You're accusing me. No one's accusing anyone, Mara interrupted smoothly. We're simply stating the evidence. But given what we've found, the court will likely declare the amendment invalid and restore the original will. Leah's eyes darted between us, searching for control she no longer had. You're lying, she whispered. You just want the house back. I leaned forward, then the first time I'd spoken since the meeting began. I don't want your house, Leah. I want my father's truth, the one you tried to bury under lies. Her lips trembled. You don't understand. He wanted me to have this house. He said I reminded him of what? I cut in. Of the daughter you pretended to be? The words came sharper than I expected. Her face crumpled, not with guilt, but with fury. He pitied you, Nora. You were always the fragile one. He told me once he didn't think you could handle responsibility. That's enough, Mara said, voice like steel. But I didn't need to hear more. I'd already seen the truth, not in her words, but in her eyes. Leah hadn't just forged a document. She'd rewritten a man's legacy for her own comfort. 2 weeks later, the court ruled in my favor. The amendment was declared void. The estate reverted to its original terms, split evenly between Elaine and me. Leah was charged with forgery and fraud. I'll never forget the day the sheriff came to the house with papers in hand. Leah stood on the porch, trembling, mascara streaking down her cheeks, as she realized her empire of lies had collapsed. She didn't fight. She didn't scream. She just whispered, he would have wanted me here. And for a moment, despite everything, I almost believed she believed that. When she left, the house fell silent, almost too silent. Elaine and I stood in the hallway, surrounded by half-packed boxes and the smell of dust. She finally turned to me, tears streaming freely now. Nora, I'm so sorry. I should have seen what she was doing. I didn't want to believe she was capable of it. I nodded gently. She fooled everyone, Elaine. Even me. We sat together on the couch, the same one Dad used to nap on after work, and for the first time in months, we talked without walking on eggshells. Elaine told me about the last days before he passed. How Leah handled everything, the bills, the doctor calls, even the hospice arrangements. She said she was helping me, but now I realize she was taking control. I took her hand. She can't hurt us anymore. Elaine nodded, her voice breaking. I just wish he'd seen what she really was before he died. I looked around the room, the photos on the walls, the faint outline of where Dad's favorite chair used to sit. He sees it now, I said quietly. And I think he's proud of us for standing up for him. The months that followed were slow but healing. We renovated the house together, not in a flashy, new owner way, but with small touches that brought Dad back to life. His favorite armchair returned to the corner. His framed fishing photo hung above the fireplace again. One day, while repainting the study, Elaine found a sealed envelope wedged behind the bookshelf. It was addressed to me. The handwriting was shaky, but unmistakably his. Asterisk. Nora, if you're reading this, I probably didn't get a chance to say everything I wanted to. You've always been my heartstrong, even when you don't feel it. Don't let anyone tell you who you are, or what you deserve. You'll know what's right when the time comes. Love, Dad. Asterisk. I read it 3 times before the tears came. Because, even after death, he was still guiding me, reminding me that truth has a way of finding the light, no matter how deep someone tries to bury it. Leah never came back to town. Word spread that she'd moved states away, changed her name, and started over. I don't hate her, not anymore. Some people build their lives on taking. It's the only way they know how to feel powerful. But me? I learned that my power isn't in revenge, it's in reclaiming peace. Sometimes, late at night, I still sit on the porch with a cup of tea and imagine Dad beside me. The air hums with the same quiet warmth it used to when we'd talk for hours. I whisper, "It's okay now, Dad. It's finally okay." And in that stillness, I swear I can almost hear him say, "That's my girl. There's something strange about peace. It doesn't arrive with fireworks or grand gestures. It comes quietly, like the moment after a storm, when the world smells of wet earth and silence. That's what life became after Leah was gone. For the first time in months, I could walk through my father's house without feeling like an intruder. I'd open the windows every morning and let sunlight flood the rooms that had once been shrouded in tension. The house no longer sighed with secrets, it breathed again. Elaine stayed with me for a while. We rebuilt our relationship thread by fragile thread. We cooked breakfast together, she'd hum softly as she scrambled eggs, and I'd pour coffee, both of us pretending not to notice when our voices caught at small memories of him. One morning, while setting the table, she said, "You know, your father used to talk about you all the time. He said you had a heart like your mother, quiet but fierce." That caught me off guard. I hadn't heard anyone mention my mother in years. Elaine smiled gently. "He was proud of you, Nora, even when he didn't say it enough." I swallowed hard, letting her words settle where old wounds used to ache. In the weeks that followed, I started volunteering at the local community center. It wasn't a dramatic choice. I just needed to be somewhere that wasn't filled with ghosts. I helped seniors with paperwork, served meals, and listened to their stories. There was a comfort in hearing other people talk about their families, their regrets, their small joys. It reminded me that pain was universal, and survival, somehow, was too. One afternoon, an older woman named Mrs. Lane told me something that stuck. She said, "When someone wrongs you, darling, you can spend your whole life holding the wound, or you can learn to bless the scar." I smiled politely at the time, but that night, I couldn't sleep. I kept turning those words over in my head. Bless the scar. Leah had left more than financial damage. She'd carved doubt into me. Doubt about family, about love, about whether kindness ever really mattered in a world so easily swayed by greed. But as the days passed, I realized kindness wasn't weakness. My father's softness hadn't made him a fool. It had made him human, and his humanity was what kept me from becoming bitter. A few months later, I received a letter from Leah. The envelope was plain. No return address. Inside, a short note, written in her careful, tight handwriting. "Nora, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. I thought taking control would make me feel secure, but all it did was make me smaller. Take care of Helene. She needs someone who still believes in family." There was no signature, no closure, just that small confession. I didn't know whether to believe her part of me didn't want to, but another part, the part that still remembered us as teenagers, sitting on the front steps trying to be sisters, that part ached for her. I folded the letter and placed it in my father's old wooden chest, right beside the one he wrote to me. 2 letters, one of love, one of regret, resting side by side. Because forgiveness isn't about saying what happened was okay. It's about deciding not to let it define you anymore. Spring came early that year. The yard bloomed wild with daffodils, just like it did when Dad used to garden every weekend. I spent an afternoon tending to them, pruning, watering, whispering to the flowers like he used to. It felt silly, but also strangely comforting. When I stood back, I noticed how full the garden looked again, alive, colorful, even imperfect in its own beautiful way. That's when I realized, that's what healing really is. It's not the absence of damage. It's growth in spite of it. A year later, Elaine decided to move closer to her grandchildren. She hugged me tight before leaving and said, "This house finally feels like home again. You gave it back its heart." After she drove away, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the light fade behind the hills. The house was quiet, but it was a good quiet this time. I thought of Dad, of Leah, of everything that had been lost and found. And I whispered, "I'm okay now." The wind stirred gently through the trees, almost like an answer. Now, when people ask me what happened, why I fought so hard to keep that old house, I don't talk about inheritance or property. I tell them this. It wasn't about walls or land. It was about dignity, about protecting the part of my father that still lived within those walls, and within me. And maybe, if Leah ever finds her way back here, I hope she'll see that too. That love doesn't need to be stolen or forged. It just needs to be earned. I keep my father's letter framed in my study now. Some nights, when the world feels heavy again, I read the line that saved me. "You'll know what's right when the time comes." And I whisper, "I did, Dad. I did." You know, when I look back now, I don't remember the shouting or the court dates. What I remember is the silence that came afterward, the kind that feels like peace, not punishment. There was a time when I thought strength meant fighting louder, holding tighter, never letting go until I won. But I've learned something softer since then. Sometimes, strength is just walking away from the ashes without bitterness. It's choosing to rebuild with grace, even when your heart still trembles. I didn't get back everything I lost. No one really does. But I got something better. I got myself back. And maybe that's what my father wanted for me all along. Not revenge. Not victory. Just freedom. The kind that comes when you stop needing someone else to see your worth. Now, when I sit on that porch in the evening light, tea warming my hands, I think of him, of what he taught me, without ever saying a word. That love isn't a transaction. Family isn't a title written on a will. And truth. Truth will always find its way home. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, if someone you called family took more than you thought you could bear, I want you to remember this. You are still whole. You are still worthy. And you can still rebuild from what they tried to break. Because peace doesn't mean forgetting what happened. It means forgiving yourself for how long it took to let go. Would you have fought the way I did? Or would you have walked away sooner? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to know what you would have done. And if my story meant something to you today, stay a while. There are more stories here about pain, yes, but also about healing, love, and finding your voice again. Because in the end, that's all any of us are really doing, trying to find our way back home.